Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, hi and welcome to inFocus. We're glad that you've joined us. This is a special inFocus production. We have, many of you are aware that this past September 25th that we migrated from standard definition to high definition television, and we have also physically moved our main transmission of our master control, building a studio right now, and as a result we're not able to provide for you the live inFocus program, so tonight's program is pre-recorded, but with a very current issue that is of our election, and we're going to be talking about this election taking place tomorrow, the very critical election that's before us, and we thank you for joining us. If you have questions in your mind as to what's on this ballot, how do you register, the basic 101 of elections and voting, we're glad that you're watching here tonight so we can provide for you critical information. But friends, the matter is right before us here on Election Day, and we invite you to stay tuned as we welcome back to our studios Daniel Degner, who is the president of Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, good to have you back with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We had a great time last week.
We did, and Sam Krebs with us, the legislative director for Wisconsin Family Action. Good to have you back, Sam.
Thanks, Shane. Looking forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, much information that we have here, and we're going to be talking about what's on the ballot, what are the ramifications on this ballot as well. But the key aspect right now, our main message is, friends, you need to go vote. This is a very, very critical election, and we'll be sharing with you some quotes as well here today as it relates to the election itself. But first, let's talk about what's on the ballot. Daniel, we're going to have you talk, and let's talk first of all what's on the federal side of things, and then we're going to have Sam talk about what's on the state side of things.
Yeah, so the federal side of things, it's a very important election cycle. We have one of the biggest presidential election cycles in our American history is on the ballot, and it looks like it very well could come down to our state here in Wisconsin. So very, very important election cycle from that perspective. We also have a U.S. Senate election, and that U.S. Senate election recently went from a lean Democrat now to a toss-up seat. So that'll be very important to see, and it also has the potential to flip the majority of the U.S. Senate going into the next 2 years. And then we also have all 8 congressional seats in Wisconsin that are up for re-election. The seats to watch out for are especially Congressional District 3 in the southwestern part of the state, as well as Congressional District 1, but it looks like Congressional District 3 in the southwestern part of the state will be very close. I
had heard from a number of individuals who've said, I'm not voting in this election. One person emailed me and said, you know, there's so many lies on both sides that I'm just not going to vote on this. And somebody else shared with me a quote from a pastor who said, we're not voting on personalities, we're voting on policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even add to the not just voting for the policies, but we are voting for an administration. Especially when we look at the presidential level, we are voting to bring leadership in and having executives in that will really be able to make an impact on especially issues that impact us in the areas of marriage, family, life, and religious liberty. And here in Wisconsin, a big issue is how do we deal with Title IX issues in our school classrooms? Where are we forcing gender identity on these elementary school students? And that is really the difference of what administration serves in. And it's a great opportunity for us as Christians not to think of, I'm voting for an evil, but how are we voting to lessen evil by voting for the candidates that will better reflect biblical values.
And you bring up a real great point here, Daniel, because whoever we elect for president, they are the ones that appoint cabinet members. And those cabinet members then make all the policies that go throughout their department and eventually flow down, for instance, into the classroom. You mentioned Title IX, so the Department of Education. This next president is going to determine who is going to head the Department of Education, but also who's going to be the Secretary of State, who is going to be, fostering relationships with countries around the world. We see what's the tensions in the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine war, North and South Korea, China and Taiwan, and it just explodes from there. Secretary of Defense, we've got the military aspect, the Attorney General. Last week we played a clip from Ben Carson about the weaponizing of the Attorney General's office. Yeah. We talk about energy policies for our nation. We were once energy independent, and now we become more energy dependent upon other nations. This president will determine who is going to head that department. We mentioned education, Treasury, Interior, Labor, Health and Human Services, just dealing with abortion-related issues in our state. So when we talk about president, it's more than just that person that sits in the Oval Office. All of these other cabinet level positions will be impacted.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing that I would really encourage Christians to think through too is you're also trying to you're trying to elect someone who gives you an opportunity for influence. And we talked last week, speaking of that Ben Carson video, about how one candidate has been very clear about their stance on not allowing Christians to have a voice in their government, and another candidate who has said they absolutely want to have Christians to have a voice. And when we bring people like Sam to the state capitol or even to Washington, D.C., we want to make sure that Christians are able to have a voice to influence whoever is serving in that presidential office.
Now, let's also point out that whoever takes the Oval Office is also the one who's going to make the appointment of judges, federal judges, nominating them. We'll talk about the importance of the Senate here, but this is a person who's going to determine what judges to put forward here. We know in broadcasting, this is the president who puts another commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission bench as well. That's critical. And then we look at what's happening to our borders, our nation's borders. And the policies we're going to have. Are we going to foster a nation of open borders or that which is going to secure the borders? So it's a very critical position.
Yeah, especially when we talk about the judges, the last Trump administration, it was crucial to see the sort of judges that were able to come through and the policies. Unfortunately, in America, we've really seen a weaponization of that third branch of government, the judicial branch, to where they've actually gone into more of a legislative role. And so we really need to make sure that we elect candidates who will bring judges to the legislative seat, to the judicial seat, that will really view it through the correct constitutional lens.
Yeah, that's not theory. We're seeing that in actuality right here in the state of Wisconsin.
Yep.
And the judiciary as it regards the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Sam, let's talk about the state side of things here too. There's a lot happening here.
Indeed, there are a number of things to be paying attention to. The first one is that all 99 seats of Assembly are up for election, so you will see a representative on your ballot that you will be voting for.
Now, and there's talk that this could really go one way or another in this election. I mean, right now there's a huge Republican advantage in the legislature, but they're saying it could be a toss-up.
Yeah, that's correct. So the redistricting process that happened earlier this year really shook things up. So there have been a number of seats that were traditionally Republican that are now completely Democrat. So those seats will completely flip over without much of a race. There are probably about 10 to 15 seats that are in contention right now. And so the way that those seats go, those 10, 15, if they go a certain direction towards Democrats, they will gain control of the Assembly. If the Republicans are able to retain enough seats and keep them from being flipped, they will retain control of the Assembly. So that number to hit for is 50, because there's 99 seats. So if you hit 50, you have maintained control of the Assembly. So we will be watching very closely to see what members are winning those very tight election seats.
Yeah, and some really are in a battle for their life right now.
Correct. They are, we're going to see elections come down to 50, 100 votes in some of these potentially. It really speaks to the influence that Christians can have in their election. If you and your church in your area really turn out the vote, your church or the churches in your area could be the determining factor in not just that race, but then the direction of the state as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talked about the state assembly, all 99 seats, and then the Senate?
Half of the Senate is up for election. Same situation as well with redistricting. There's a number of seats that are, at least 5, that are very tightly contested, and they will be, once again, control of the Senate will be determined not necessarily in this cycle, because right now the majority is so high that even if they were to lose all the seats, Republicans would still maintain control. But looking forward is because the next half of senators will be up for re-election in 2026. That will really put the Senate into play as well.
Okay, and I know one of the races we're watching very closely is a Senate seat that is currently held by Dewey Strobel.
That's correct. That is probably from statistics I've seen, the most expensive state legislative race in Wisconsin history.
Yeah.
I've seen upwards of $5, $6, $7, $8 million being spent, which is just unheard of in modern times even, for a state legislative race. So I'm sure your viewers probably have seen the number of ads, whether it's on regular TV, radio, the billboards, the flyers, the social media ads. You're probably sick of them at this point. But regardless, it is one of the most important races in the state Senate.
I'm going to have you comment on one other issue here, and that is our referendum question that is on the ballot. And let me read this, and we'll put it on the screen here. The eligibility to vote, and this, friend, is on every single ballot in the state of Wisconsin. If you are voting in Wisconsin, this will be on your ballot. Eligibility to vote. Shall Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution, which deals with suffrage, be amended to provide that only a United States citizen age 18 or older who resides in the election district may vote in an election for national, state, or local office or at a statewide or local referendum. Key words here is that only person who is a United States citizen would be eligible to vote. Tell us about this referendum question, and what does yes mean, what does no mean?
Yeah, that's great. So the yes vote means that you want to switch the constitutions, that we said that keywords only, switching every U.S. citizen to only U.S. citizens can vote. So a yes vote means that you are in support of making sure that only U.S. citizens can vote. A no vote means you're okay with the status quo. The problem that some might see with that is that it might allow for non-citizens to vote based on what we've seen with other states. I'd also like to point out that you might also see on your ballot local referendum as well, whether that's for your county, for your city, or even school referendum. So be sure to check out your ballot on myvote.wi.gov to make sure that you're seeing what your sample ballot looks like, because those local referendums also have a big influence on your life.
Great, Dave. Thank you for mentioning that. And friends, again, that's an important website to take a look at, myvote.wi.gov. You just put it on your computer. It's a very handy tool, and you will put in your address, because that's how ballots are determined, where you live, what district you're in. And so you put in your address. Nobody is tracking you doing this. You put in your address, and then you have several options to choose. What's on my ballot? How to register? Where's my polling place? You have all of this information that's available there, but you can see your sample ballot. When you click on what's on my ballot, you hit that, and voila, you've got your ballot there. You can see the different races, who is running. Some of you are going to find names on your ballot you never knew were there, even for the presidential race or for other races. You're going to see a multiplicity of names. You'll be able to cast your vote, and unlike the primary, you can vote for one party in this race, a different party, a different race, so you can switch back and forth. But going to that website, Daniel, is so critically important to at least go in with knowledge so you don't get there and get surprised at the ballot booth.
Absolutely, and every year, and we encourage people, if you don't know what to do or you have questions about your ballot, call us. We'd love to help if you call our office, but every year without fail, we always have people that call when they get to the polling place and say, I don't know who to vote for. And so we would encourage you, look it up, just make sure that you have those details so you can be aware before you walk in the polling place.
Yeah.
If you do have further questions, feel free to call our office, and we'd be more than glad to help you. And I just wanted to highlight something that Sam shared earlier. And you as Christians, you really have a huge impact to make an impact this election cycle. When we looked at the numbers from the 2020 election, Wisconsin was decided by just under 21,000 votes. Wisconsin, we have about 3,000 evangelical churches in our state. So if you do the math, if there was just 7 extra Christians in each of those churches that would have voted who didn't vote, it would have been the difference between who Wisconsin sent their votes for the Electoral College to. But when we look at this very essential presidential election, we look at the U.S. Senate election, we look at the state legislative seats, if just 7 extra people in our churches who aren't voting vote, it could be the difference between the policies we have for the next 2, 4, and even 6 years in our country.
You know, Daniel, there's a very alarming poll that came out from George Barna, and he talked about the millions of Christians who are either not registered or who do not plan to vote. What's your response to that? Some think, well, you know, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My citizenship is in heaven. What role and responsibility do I have as a Christian to participate?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's a stewardship responsibility. We have an opportunity. God has given us this unique government that we have in a constitutional republic where we, the people, have the opportunity to be the kings that we see referenced in the Bible, that we can speak into government to vote to lessen evil. And so it's a huge stewardship responsibility for us as Christians. But I would even argue that it's an act of worship, that we know that we serve a sovereign God, that ultimately He's in control and will still be sovereign after whoever wins or loses those offices tomorrow night. But ultimately, it's an act of worship that we are going out there to vote to lessen evil in a way that brings honor and glory to Jesus Christ.
Okay, now you bring this really close to us tomorrow night. I mean, we are within hours of, we're part of Election Day taking place Tuesday. Tomorrow morning is Election Day. Polls open at 7 a.m., staying open until 8 p.m. Local time. As long as you're standing in line, I understand that you can cast your vote. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. Polls 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and just make sure that you go. The opportunities early voter pass, the opportunities to absentee voter pass. Right. You have one chance, you have one day to go vote. I encourage you to do that, whatever it takes to get to there. If you're in line, you're going to get to vote.
Yep. And if you still do have an absentee ballot, whether it was mailed to you or however, you still have an opportunity to vote. Even if you didn't get it, you just go to your clerk's office, tell them about what happened, or you can even deliver it. You can hand deliver it up until 8 p.m. So if you do have an absentee ballot and you haven't returned it yet, you can still vote by returning it to your polling place by 8 p.m.
And for those watching right now, I said, you know what? I missed my vote here. I never registered. What options do they have?
Yeah. Well, thankfully in Wisconsin, we have a very easy system to register to vote. So you can go to your polling place the day of the election and register to vote. What you'll need is you'll need to be able to show that you've lived there for at least 28 days. You'll need a photo ID, and then you need something like a utility bill or even just a bank statement that shows that that's your actual living address. But you can still register to vote if you show up to the polls by 8 p.m.
Okay, and friends, it's upon us, and we encourage you, if you have not already participated in the process, if you've not mailed in your absentee ballot, if you've not gone and participated in early voting, you really have one last opportunity. Your polling places are open from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. Again, if you don't know where you to go, you can go online to get that information, or call your municipal office, your city clerk's office, your county office. They'll tell you. You'll get the information. It's available as to where to go vote. But don't sit this election out. You said something earlier, Daniel, and I caught a quote from Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis recently, and this is what he said: "We need to maximize righteousness and minimize evil." Similar to what you said.
Yeah, well, and it's not something that I've created or even that Ken Ham's created, but we see this in the scriptures that God has created government for the purpose of punishing evil and rewarding good. And so as we look to vote, we should look for candidates that ultimately are going to have that framework to really punish what is evil as God has declared through his word, but to really reward what is good as God has also declared through his word.
And Sam, there's a website people can go to even to find candidate information.
That's correct. We, in partnership with iVoterGuide.com, provide information. It's a nonpartisan information that grades candidates on the scale of their voting history, who endorsed them, their donation history, a wide range of information that we take and then compile into a list. So you put in your address at that website, and it will give you each candidate that's in your race for your area, and then it'll have a grade on them, whether they're conservative or leans conservative, or they're moderate or leans liberal. You have all that information at your fingertips then to make a wise decision on who you can vote for.
It's iVoterGuide.com, and something else about that site is not only it's got the federal offices there for Congress and our U.S. Senate seat, but the state offices are there too.
That's correct. It is everything down from president down to state legislative races. And it even includes a blurb on the referendum. So it has pretty much everything you need other than local referendums. It has a lot of information on that.
And it helps you understand what that yes vote means, what a no vote means.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah, so that's very, very important. Thomas Jefferson said this. He wrote in his retirement papers, he said, "We in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate." It's very important.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And that's why it's so essential for Christians to really step up and to make sure that we are honoring God with our vote, that we're being good stewards of our vote, because we really have an impact to really put people in positions of power and of authority over us, who can have policies that promote good values, but also kill and destroy policies or legislation that would promote evil.
Yeah, and we're seeing an election like we've never witnessed before in this nation. I don't believe, certainly not in my lifetime, where we see such stark contrast between the candidates and people really starting to question. And I'm holding in my hand right now, this is from the Daily Caller News Foundation, and they mentioned that the owner of the Los Angeles Times instructed the paper not to make a presidential endorsement for the first time in 2 decades. They called it the most consequential election in a generation, but the owner said don't endorse a candidate. What's interesting is that the editorial board has endorsed a Democratic candidate in every presidential election since it was first publicly backed President Barack Obama in the 2008 race, according to Cernafor, who released this information here. And it's critically important to understand there's a lot of businesses, newspapers, and so forth. They're questioning where we are going. They call it the most consequential election.
Yeah, it's a critical election. We look at just the different policies, and just you had mentioned earlier, just even the weaponization of the Department of Justice and all these other issues. I think there's a good reason for people to say that there's a lot going on. There's a lot that will impact us, and we really need to make sure that we are looking at the candidates, we're looking at the values that they'll present, and that we vote in a way that ultimately brings honor and glory to Christ.
Right.
And I would jump in there and say we really are seeing a country that's in flux right now. We are teetering on a balance of which direction this country will go. I think Christians can play a large part into that. They have a large role, and even a growing role, maybe a revival in Christians being able to speak in the public square with boldness. I've seen from people who are secular recognizing the benefits, recognizing the value that Christians bring to the table. And I think we have an opportunity to step forward into that light and speak the truth, and hopefully be able to convince our country of the right direction to go.
There was another quote I want to share from Samuel Adams. He was one of the founding fathers, and he said, "Let each citizen remember at the moment that he is offering his vote that he is executing one of the most solemn trust in human society for which he's accountable to God and his country."
That is one of my favorite quotes. I've had that quote memorized for probably about a decade now. Just historically, such an impactful quote. To remember that your vote is accountable to God. It puts it really in perspective when you stand in the ballot box and you're filling the bubbles there. You're not making a vote to Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. You're not making a vote to either people. It's a vote between what you and what God leads you to do. And so I think that plays such a large responsibility and such a privilege on us here in America. That's not a privilege that the entire world, even in terms of history, most of the time of history, people have not had that privilege. And so it lays both that privilege and the responsibility on us, and we have the great honor to participate in our election process. And I hope that people here today, who are listening today, will participate tomorrow in the election.
There are those who have equated this to being really, are we going to remain a constitutional republic, or are we going to follow the pathway of socialism? Is it really that? Is that being over sensationalized, or is that really at stake?
No, I don't think it's being over sensationalized. I think we are really at a crossroads as a country of we're really trying to figure out, do we believe in free markets? Do we believe in religious freedom? Or do we really believe in tyrannical government that says you have to have the same beliefs that the secular society has, or even promoting and pushing Christians to do things that they're not comfortable with? Last week I mentioned, but there was a recent video that came out where Vice President Harris was even asked if medical providers should be given exemptions for religious reasons to not provide abortions. And the answer was absolutely no. We need to provide a right for a woman to choose, and even forcing Christians to violate their conscience.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's happening in hospitals. Those who don't want to participate in a so-called gender-changing surgery, you can't change somebody's gender, but you have these kind of things that are in flux right now. So religious liberty is really at stake in this election.
I would say it's at stake in the hospitals. It's at stake in the classrooms. We saw a teacher who was respectful and was trying to. There was a child who was portraying as a different gender, and they would not call them by their pronouns, their incorrect gender pronouns.
Right.
And so that teacher was eventually fired and released from his position. There was a lawsuit to hold the school accountable for essentially violating that individual's religious beliefs. So you can see that it's spreading throughout society. It's not just going to be in the hospital. It's going to go to the classroom, and they will push it towards the churches as well.
For those who are listening to the program tonight, watching here, and said, I've got some more questions. I didn't quite understand this referendum question. Can they reach out to you at Wisconsin Family Council? Yeah,
absolutely. They can call us, and if they have any questions, they're more than welcome to. But we also even have on our website an explainer of the referendum. So you can go to wifamilycouncil.org, or you can call our office.
Okay, again, that's wifamilycouncil.org. Check it out, wifamilycouncil.org. You can also call them 1-888-378-7395 for further questions in this regard. Another quote here, which came from William Simon, former U.S. Secretary to the Treasury. He said, "Bad politicians are sent to Washington by good people who don't vote."
Yeah, absolutely. When we have Christians that sit out in election cycles, it allows for these other votes to come in that really make an impact and can cause the election. As I shared that number before, if just 7 people in each evangelical church would have voted last election cycle, it could have made a huge impact. And I think of the midterm election, our attorney general race was very much an election of, do we allow for abortion, even though the law in Wisconsin doesn't allow for abortion, or do we uphold the rule of law? And we elected the candidate who said he was going to allow abortion on demand. Now, That race, if we would have just had 12 evangelical voters in each church that would have voted that didn't vote, it would have made the impact of whether or not abortion is happening in Wisconsin or not. And so it's a huge, huge deal for Christians to come out and vote no later than 8 p.m. tomorrow.
Okay, so voting tomorrow, absolutely critical. But people can do more than that. Can they not offer to drive somebody to the polls? Can they not go through their church directory and make a phone call, hey, just reminding you to cast your vote?
Yeah, absolutely. We would encourage you to do that and really call at least 10 people who may not be faithful voters, people that may not vote every election, and just really encourage them, offer them, give them a ride, do whatever it takes. Maybe it's even watching the kids for a little bit, just to make sure that they can vote and that they can really cast a vote that honors God. And we would encourage you to find at least 10 people. If you can even text, email, call even 100 people that you know, that's even better. But make sure that you reach out to at least 10 people and get them to the polls.
What about those who had said, voting for the less of two evils, therefore if I vote, I'm still voting for evil? How do you respond to that?
I think that you have to look at it from a couple different lenses. One is, as Daniel mentioned previously, you're voting for more than just one person. You're voting for an administration. You're voting for, and as someone who is part of administration, I worked for Governor Walker at one point, it's more than just one person. There are, on the state level, hundreds of people, on the federal level, thousands of people that are enacting an agenda and enacting a political process there. So you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just be focused on one person. There's a bigger picture to look at. So if you take a step back, you can look at that bigger picture. But I also look at Proverbs that says, righteousness exalts the nation, and sin is a reproach to any people. And I think the challenge is to find where is righteousness, where's the most righteousness that I can vote for. That's, I think, sometimes a challenge. But no political process is perfect. It's always going to be imperfect because man is involved and man is in that process. So as a Christian, we can definitely struggle over that. I can definitely understand people struggle with that. But at the end of the day, you do have once again, going back to that Adam's quote, you have a responsibility and an obligation to participate. And my hope is that you, as a voter, would take on that responsibility, take on that privilege. So that doesn't mean you don't have to make a difficult decision. Difficult decisions are still there, but I would still encourage you to make that choice.
Sam Krebs with us, Legislative Director for Wisconsin Family Action. Sam, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Daniel, about 20 seconds, final comment.
Yeah, just an encouragement for all Christians in the state to make sure that you honor God with your vote. I think of the adage of that we work like it's up to us and we pray that it's up to God. So we pray that it's up to God for this election, but we make sure that we vote and we work to get every vote out.
Daniel, thanks for being with us here tonight.
Thank you.
Daniel's president of Wisconsin Family Council. Again, friends, if you have questions, reach out to them. wifamilycouncil.org, the website. You can also call 1-888-378-7395. Check out the website, myvote.wi.gov. You'll find a lot of information there, but a very critical election, and it gets underway tomorrow. 7 a.m. is when the polling place opens. It'll be open until 8 p.m. As always, be informed and vote prayerfully. Thanks for watching.